Morning all, let's have a look at the fascinating game in round 7 between Karjakin and Levon Aronian playing black. Karjakin kicked off with e4 and Levon chose e5, very solid, after knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. Throughout history this is the most common move, a6, but actually the Berlin defense is a really good and second most popular option nowadays. Karjakin played actually quite a timid move here, usually timid looking, usually white castles, or actually knight c3 is also popular, but d3 is the third most popular move, just supporting the e4 pawn. Bishop c5, c3, black castles, white castles. Rook e8, also another alternative was d6 there, theoretically. Knight bd2, it's all pretty standard stuff so far. a6 now. White often considers retreating here, but bishop takes c6 has also been played quite a bit. D takes. So with the fractured pawns, let's have a look at this position now from the opening. Black has some pressure down the d file, but has damaged pawns. e5 is a bit more vulnerable than before, and actually that's targeted by white with knight c4. Levon protects his pawn, and now white plays a move which seems fairly logical. The engines actually like it here for white to have a small advantage. b4. Okay, where can this bishop actually drop back to? Well, it could have dropped back maybe to f8 or to e7 is even possible. If it went back to e7, I mean, if taking, even this position from an engine perspective is okay here to temporarily give up a pawn, because a5 is actually quite annoying for white. But anyway, a more sensible looking human move is played actually here. The bishop just goes to d6. Black doesn't mind if the pawns get undoubled. If knight takes d6, I think black's very close to being fully equal there. So white wants to keep the structural damage intact. He actually just plays the move queen b3 actually was played. Okay, and now Levon plays knight f8, and it looks as though the queen's location on b3 might be subject to a pin of that knight on c4. For the moment though, bishop g5 attacking black's queen, and now clearly if f6 then we have a discovered check. That's to be avoided. So this forces an awkward looking move from Levon Aronian, playing queen d7. Nevertheless, you know, black, although with the structural damage, does have the bishop pair here and is close to being quite equal. So white actually dropped the bishop back to e3. Knight g6. So e5 is being strong pointed. It's a strong point for all these pieces. And also I think d4 is kind of discouraged here. Black can just take here and just take on e4. So without d4 it looks as though white's position hasn't got that much bite to it at the moment. This next move, knight f d2, looks as though what is the idea of knight f2, fd2? It's difficult to see white actually threatening much here. f4 is definitely under lock and key, so I don't think that's the idea. It's because sometimes with the double pawns here, white wants to exert more pressure on e5. So anyway, let's see what happened here. The bishop actually dropped back now to f8, and black is actually threatening queen takes d3 here now. Perhaps, you know, a very simple move here would be something like queen c2 or queen b1. On queen c2, rook d8. It looks already a little bit passive, to be honest, after knight b2. What is white doing? Huddled around to protect the d3 pawn on the semi-open file. And this is what I find quite fascinating, that I mean, it's hard to suggest here after bishop f8 why is white actually retreating the knight. What is white's plan here really? If instead of knight fd2, I mean, the engine suggestion is actually a4. Maybe this has a certain logic to it, to maybe try and restrain the black pawns against the future b5. If we give black a move, I mean, is a5 actually possible? I mean, this looks as though white would be free to kind of protect the d pawn with a rook move. It just seems a little bit on the awkward side, this knight fd2. I just find the game quite mysterious, how black is doing absolutely, it seems okay, and is the one with the first kind of threat on d3. So anyway, perhaps the intention was, as in the game continuation, just to play a d4 here without dropping the e4 pawn. So white has achieved d4, which you might think is useful. So here Levon is not obliged to take on d4. I think this might actually give white a small advantage with c takes d4, and then maybe, you know, a big centre later with f4, and that would be quite exciting for white. Exciting prospects. No, Levon wants to try to exploit, actually, I think, this pawn chain, the weakened light squares, subtly weakened. He actually just plays queen e7, and now it introduces the idea that actually queen b3 might be embarrassed with bishop e6, a simple pin, actually threatening things like b5 as well. White now played d takes e5, and instead of taking immediately on e5, black actually just pins that knight, now threatening b5 and knight takes e5 quite painfully. So the queen's location seems embarrassed, and it looks as though black has, in a way, more than equalised. For the bishop pair, he seems to have very, very good play, and also light square weaknesses to try and target with this structure. These light square weaknesses seem quite vulnerable as well. White dropped back, and now black actually gave up the bishop pair, so a kind of positional sacrifice in a way. So he's still got the double pawn. So why would black do this here after knight takes e5? I think it is going for a more exploitable kind of weakness, these light squares for these fixed pawns. So without the bishop pair, this kind of position, say knight takes, queen takes, and here there's also some dark square weaknesses as well. Bishop d6 would force something like g3, but a5 here guarantees black good piece play. What does white actually do about this? Something like a3, maybe we can just take here, and for example taking here would actually lose a pawn. So it seems that there's some tricks in the position already, even though black's just lost that bishop pair. White played knight d2 here. Karjakin actually, after the game, expressed that maybe taking on e5 with the pawn, maybe it would have been better to have just taken with the knight. And if we have this kind of position, here, this might be okay for white. If black wanted the queens off, for example, like this position should be okay for white. But technically, from an engine perspective, this is actually slightly better for black, with either queen h5 or queen b5. Technically, it looks strange to play a move like queen b5, though. Very, very strange indeed. But things like queen d3 are painful. These light squares just seem a bit vulnerable. So anyway, we have here this d takes e5, bishop e6. So black is again the first to kind of threaten something of significance with b5 or knight takes e5, horrible pin. So getting out of the pin. Now, okay, let's go back to this. So knight d2, and now black does seem to have good piece play, even with the double pawns. This b4 pawn, this structure seems a bit vulnerable to things like a5 for black to get good piece play. White actually played a3. Now a takes, and queen e6. So it does look as though c4 is quite vulnerable. If white does a simple thing like c4 here, then he just loses the b4 pawn. So it does seem an ideal blockade square to put a knight on c4. White plays f3, and then the knight does go to c4. So black with the double pawns just seems to be better, believe it or not, here because of the light square blockade. He's also attacking the bishop now. So the bishop actually perhaps should have gone to f2 instead of f4. It actually went to f4. And here black played c5. White played b5. Knight d6, attacking the b5 pawn. Rook takes, and now rook b1 was played, protecting b5. That was fixed down. So again, this kind of position, black stands interestingly slightly better. If a move like c4, you might think that solves the any queenside issues. If c4, apparently g6, this technically is very nice for black. This diagonal looks quite juicy. So white wanted to avoid that. He actually played a forcing move which may not be helping his position that much, e5. So knight c4, which seems to go to fail in some respect tactically because there's a loose piece here. On a8, and white actually pounces with queen e4. So attacking a8 and c4. Black now plays well, he did actually have the choice of either knight takes attacking the rook or rook a4, and he played rook a4. It looks a little bit Karpovian in structures like the Nxd where this c4 square becomes an issue later. That c3 pawn is one of white's more miserable pawns, but the light square blockade here as well is also quite impressive. So positionally, this game seems to be about having double pawns but having extra blockade capability on the light squares right now. So it might seem a bit controversial, black structure, but black seems to be doing quite well against white's structure here. White now played rook c1, and Karjakin expressed being a bit proud of this move because after knight b2, for example, there will be c4, and white should be okay. So that's the idea. Levon actually played h6. We have h4. Now knight b2 was played, and now c4. Queen d7 now. And black, if he plays queen d4 check, he'll be undoubling the pawns potentially if white takes, and also getting that huge c5 square if white took. So we have rook b1 here. Now the move rook a2 was played. So it seems what's happened here and now is, although white has fixed that c4 square, there's another issue now that this rook is actually quite active on the second rank. So d2 looks a bit vulnerable. We have bishop e3, which might actually have worsened white's position. The engine suggests knight b3 here, and if knight d3 bishop g3 or bishop h2, is black that much better? For example, here after bishop e1 may not be hugely better, but you can see the rook is very, very comfortable. So all these strange happenings from black accepting double pawns and voluntarily giving up the bishop pair is just created lots of other compensation factors. So anyway, white actually played bishop e3. Once this comes back, bishop e3, and now knight a4 is a bit of a pain, threatening again things like, well, rook takes d2 or knight c3, forking queen and rook. So it's like white is being slowly positionally outplayed at the moment. Rook b3 at least paralleling knight c3 threat, but also giving up rook d2 rather spectacularly. So there's a spectacular idea in rook b3, but what else does white do here? He has been slightly outplayed. We're talking more than half a pawn, so it's amazing, you know, but black's pieces are just all quite aggressive if you look at them. They're all quite aggressive. What other things can white do here? Because this knight c3 is a real pain here. An engine suggestion is rook e1. Does giving up d2 again like this? You might think this is weird, but e6 apparently, and then taking here to at least get this queen takes e6. Maybe this was an interesting way of playing it. Black's only slightly better apparently with the two pieces against the rook. So in the game, this is a very committal decision now already, though. That after this knight a4 we have this rook b3, so tempting rook takes d2 here. So what's Karjakin's idea? Well, it is taken, bishop takes, queen takes, and the idea now, rook d3, an important tempo gain you'd think, gives access to d8 as well as the queen coming to a8 for this pinned piece. Potentially looks quite dangerous, but Levon has this important check. Okay, he's faced with horrible looking things like rook d8. He calmly plays knight b2, so we enter into a very technical phase here. Can black really hold when his bishop is pinned and white has now queen a8? So it's looking very, very dangerous, but black just simply takes now on c4, creating a pass pawn. White plays queen a8, so threatening rook takes f8, but it's dropping h4, so queen takes h4, king g1. Now one point here is if queen e7, then that can be nudged out of the way, I think, with rook e8. That's very unpleasant for black indeed. So black here plays very accurately, has to play very accurately here against this. He plays check on e1, and now he takes on e5, getting in another pawn. That's nice in theory. White plays g3, and now another check, king h3. So we have a situation where black is, in a sense, is going to be the exchange down. If he tries to protect the bishop here, for example, with queen e7, then white actually might be just about okay. Well, when I say that, it could be just a repetition here. Yeah, and black doesn't want to draw this, so he wants to try for a win in this position. So forget queen e7. He actually offers the bishop, so knight d3, just being the exchange down for some pawns here. 3 pawns for the exchange is usually a good deal. The black queen controls that critical e4 square. So white snaps off the bishop, but hasn't got access to e4 here, or rather it would fail in this position. So let's have a look. White didn't play queen e4 check. white could take. And now just c4 shows that this c pawn is very, very dangerous. If there's a sharp line here, if rook takes, I think fairly sharp or not, rook takes c7, knight c5. This didn't happen, but if rook takes c5, b takes b6, c2, black in this kind of scenario, from an engine perspective, is winning this position. Yeah, he's just yeah, it looks as though that's with black controlling that critical diagonal. This is eventually going to be technically winning this particular position. So that can't be played. Queen e4 check cannot be played here. So instead, white played a very interesting rook e8, trying to nudge the queen away from e4 to make queen e4 check perhaps on the cards for white. There's a beautiful variation, actually Levon pointed out here as well in the queen e4 line. Let's just quickly check this one. Queen e4, c4, now rook d8, instead of rook takes f7, trying to improve with rook d8. In this position, although the exchange down but for the 3 pawns, but I know there's 2 of them that are double pawns, but here black is actually winning spectacularly, and Levon Aronian definitely saw this variation, because knight f2 check, and if king g2, can you guess what black can play here in this position if I gave you 10 seconds starting from now? Okay, in this variation black can just play c3. So the knight cuts out the d1 square. If it takes, then the pawn cuts out the d1 square, just winning here. So that's one beautiful line there. So anyway, so white, it seems queen e4 just out of the question here. This had to be correctly calculated from black. We have, so rook e8, now knight f2 check, king h4. And in this position, it seems technically black might be doing well with also with queen f1 or queen takes b5. Queen takes b5 was played, which might actually be even stronger than queen f1. So let's go with this. g4, and actually white now has the idea that this knight could actually be quite loose here. After king g3, the knight, if it stumbles there, then queen e4 check. If it goes to h1, then king g2. So that's actually something which needs to be sorted out. Well, black takes that e4 square away from the white queen with queen c4. So it looks fairly logical from one perspective, just taking away that check square. And it's the only move, in fact. Other moves actually don't do at all well here. It is fairly dangerous. If c6, for example, white can at least potentially draw this with f4 here. This is something to be avoided. It's just perpetual check. So no, black played the exact move needed. Queen c4 seems fairly logical. White now plays queen c8, trying to go into the f5 square. Actually, there was a very, very interesting try though. Let's just mention this here. After queen c4, there's a very interesting try for white to be appreciated here, that white can actually consider trying to mate the black king with his own king, helping with king h5. So white is now threatening mate in 1, but black can parry this with g6 check, and now here white is now threatening rook h8 and queen f8, and that will be quite devastating. But black has queen d4 here, protecting h8, And in this position, rook f8 seems still quite dangerous, but black can extinguish this with check. After knight d3, queen e8 still seems quite dangerous, and this is mentioned in post-game analysis. So f7 is attacked. Black here, according to Levon in post-mortem, was okay with queen e5, was doing well, but actually there's an even stronger move technically. Queen e5 check might almost not work actually in this position, even though black seems to have these running pawns. For example, like this, it starts to get a little bit scary for black if the king can go across. So this position might actually be a little bit scary for black, might be approaching equality. So there's actually a stronger move in this line, which is technically it's queen d6, believe it or not, for knight e5. So the point is here, queen d2 check and queen d5. This is going to be dangerous for coordination on f3. So what does white actually do here? If white takes this, then the checks are going to just run out here. They just run out there. So this is actually technically the way to do it, apparently, this position. So black should be better here. If f4, for example, queen d2 check, and then we can pick up the f4 pawn soon and be protecting f7 again. So anyway, after queen c4, white tried queen c8, and we have queen f4 threatening queen h2 mating. White now got the queens off, but these pawns are just winning for black. c4. White played rook e7. Now I think one of the strongest moves in the position to slow white's rook down, c5. So the double pawns are pretty good here. It's shielding that pawn there. White's just too slow here. This pawn is coming down the board. White tried here f6. Sorry, pardon me. White actually played rook takes f7 with the idea of f6. Black now just plays c3. The pawn is just queening after f6. Black now finished with king g6. It doesn't even matter if the rook's coming to g1 here. It's all over. White resigned. If rook takes g7, king takes rook g1, for example, the knight is just helping that c pawn with knight d3. So black's going to be playing c2 here. I found the game, very technically interesting, because if you consider, for example, the games of Mikhail Tal, the Sicilian games where black was getting slaughtered in Sicilian. This is like a very, very solid opening approach from black. And if white's going to play moves like d3, it doesn't seem that scary, this opening at all for black. If black's major issue was accepting the double pawns, but even that he got lots of pressure on the queen side and great piece play, then it seems a fantastic opening, maybe for everyone to try out at some point. Although it does have a kind of dullish reputation, the Berlin defense, but it seems one reason why I think many grandmasters nowadays are tempted to explore other things apart from e4, like Catalan systems more and more. It just seems a very, very viable defense, giving black a very solid opening. And as this game shows, the double pawns seem to be of little significance if black can, at the right time, give up the bishop pair, which is the immediate compensation for the double pawns, and get other dynamic advantages. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.